Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. Today, in fact, in the Delhi edition, we have a number of important articles. And as we have always promised, this channel shall be a one-stop destination for all your current affairs problems, especially with regard to newspaper-based current affairs. So we will not leave behind any important article, and I have chosen 11 important articles for a detailed discussion. There are around 7 articles that are relevant both for prelims and mains, which require a more comprehensive analysis, and few small articles which are useful only for the prelims exam. So let's ensure we cover the paper as comprehensively as possible, so that you don't have to go back and read the paper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin the discussion, and before that, I would like to remind you to join our official Telegram channel, because after the session ends, we provide you practice questions on these articles. This quiz, the Hindu analysis quiz, will help you prepare for the prelims and as well as revise these articles. So do join the Telegram channel using the QR code, or the link is provided in the description box below. So let's start with the first article from page number 1, and there are few related articles on page number 12. This topic is related to Indian polity. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of India has delivered a landmark judgment with regard to reservation in India. A constitution bench, a 7-judge constitution bench, has delivered a verdict with a 6:1 majority, allowing the state governments to provide for sub-classification when it comes to reservation or quotas within the SC/ST category. Recently, you might remember, we spoke about the policy of reservation, the policy of affirmative action. We understood how reservation has benefited few sections of the society, whereas many other segments of our society have been left behind. So there was a very important case that the Supreme Court was looking at, which was dealing with the sub-classification within the SC community when it comes to providing reservation to uplift the backward classes. So let's evaluate this topic in detail. Let's understand why is this ruling so important. Let's look at all the different dimensions related to this topic. So as I mentioned, a 7-judge constitution bench headed by Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, has passed this landmark verdict in a 6:1 majority. 6 of the judges have agreed that states have a right to sub-classify the scheduled castes to identify the most backward SC communities within the SC category and provide preferential treatment to the most backward SC communities. Now, if you look at the Indian Constitution, we have Article 14 that guarantees right to equality. It's a fundamental right guaranteed through the Indian Constitution. We have Article 15 that prohibits the state from discrimination. The state is prohibited from carrying out any kind of discrimination on the grounds of religion, caste, place of birth, sex, etc. You have Article 16, which mandates the state to provide equality with regard to public employment. So these are the basic fundamental rights with regard to right to equality in India. But in the interest of ensuring social justice, our constitution framers introduced the policy of affirmative action, which allows the state to carry out a positive discrimination. When it comes to an unequal society, it becomes important to treat the communities unequally as well. So under Article 15 and 16, there are exceptions. The most socially, educationally backward communities, they can be favored by the state in order to uplift those communities. Then recently, even for economically weaker sections, the policy of affirmative action has been extended. So, for socially, educationally backward communities and other backward classes, that is OBCs, and as well as for economically weaker sections, the Constitution has a provision under Article 15 and 16 to provide for reservation in education and also in public employment. So this ensures equity in the society. It provides for upliftment of these backward communities. It provides for upward social mobility and ensures social justice. But however, the policy of reservation has always been a point of controversy. Initially, when reservation was provided to SCs and STs, 15% reservation was extended to the SC community, 7.5% reservation to the ST community. This was meant to be implemented for a period of 10 years, if you look at the initial constitution. But this has been subsequently extended through repeated amendments, and many see this as a political tool, as an electoral strategy to create vote banks. In the 80s and 90s, during the Mandal era of politics, the Mandal Commission proposed reservation of up to 27% for the other backward classes. And despite all the controversy and protests, OBC reservation was introduced, and this has subsequently been expanded by the governments, by the center and the states. There are few states which have even breached the 50% cap in reservation that was laid down by the Supreme Court in the landmark Indira Savni judgment. So there has been a controversial past when it comes to reservation in India. But one cannot argue with the concept of affirmative action. Political parties and governments might have misused the tool for electoral reasons. But however, the policy of affirmative action, if it is used correctly and targeted correctly, it will help in uplifting the most backward communities, and probably it's the only way to achieve social justice in a diverse country with so many backward communities. But one concern here always was that what if few sections within SC, ST or OBC category, what if only they are benefiting from reservation? What if there are other subcastes which are not deriving the benefits and thus creating a new kind of inequality within each category? Now this question with regard to OBCs was addressed by the Supreme Court in the Indira Savni judgment. In the Indira Savni judgment, along with placing a 50% cap on reservation, the Supreme Court introduced the concept of creamy layer to ensure that those who are already economically advanced, educationally advanced, they won't enjoy the benefits of reservation again. So depending on the family income level, depending on the occupation of the parents, the child cannot claim reservation if the family falls into this category of creamy layer. For example, the children of, let's say, Group A IAS officers, IPS officers, right? So under OBC category, creamy layer was introduced to ensure that those who have benefited from reservation are excluded, and the affirmative action becomes available to the other backward sections within that category. But the concept of creamy layer was never extended to SCs and STs. Even now, it has not been extended to SCs and STs. Now, apart from the creamy layer concept, the other issue has been sub-classification. Now, within each category, if there are different levels of development, if there are varying degrees of backwardness within SCs, within STs, within OBCs, the question is there a need for sub-classifying them? Should there be preferential treatment within each category for the most backward communities? So this has been a pressing question. It has even acquired political overtones, as several opposition parties have demanded a socio-economic caste census, so that there is data available to determine which castes, which subcastes are the most backward, and accordingly reservations can be targeted. So this question had reached the doorstep of the Supreme Court, and there is a history behind this as well when it comes to subclassification of castes. If you look at the state government of Punjab, in 1975, Punjab had introduced subclassification. It had extended SC reservation up to 25%. And within the SC category, it had divided the reservation into two different groups. And the first priority had been given to the most backward SC communities, such as the Balmiki and the Masabi Sikh communities. They have been considered as the most backward amongst the SC category. So, Punjab government gave preferential treatment to these most backward SC communities while clubbing all the other SC communities under the second category. A similar attempt was done in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu also introduced a law which provided for subcategorization within SCs which would provide preferential treatment to certain categories of subcastes. Andhra Pradesh also made a similar attempt. So this was struck down in 2004 by the Supreme Court itself in the E.V. Chinnaya judgment. In the E.V. Chinnaya judgment of 2004, the Supreme Court had struck down the subclassification within SCs as unconstitutional. Because see, under the Constitution of India, we have Article 341, which empowers the President of India to notify the scheduled caste list through which reservation is extended to these communities. So based on this provision, the Supreme Court held in 2004 that state governments cannot meddle with the presidential list that has been notified. The Supreme Court held that it would be a violation of Article 341 and the powers of the centre. So thus it had struck down subclassification of SCs as far as quotas and reservation was concerned. Now this issue had reached the doorsteps of the Supreme Court eventually, because following the E.V. Chinnaya judgment, Punjab High Court had struck down this reservation. In Tamil Nadu as well, the subcategorization which had been done was squashed by the High Court, and of course through E.V. Chinnaya judgment, the Supreme Court had struck down the law brought in by Andhra Pradesh, the then Andhra Pradesh government. So these petitions collectively had reached the doorsteps of the Supreme Court, and a larger constitution bench had been constituted. So after several rounds of hearing, the Supreme Court has opined that sub-classification is necessary. It's not just constitutional, but it is necessary to do social justice in our country. Now this is where we need to look at the opinion of Justice Gavai in this judgment. Justice Gavai has made a very interesting and a very beautiful argument. In this landmark ruling, Justice Gavai has opined that unequals have to be treated unequally in order to ensure that there is real equity, to ensure that there is social justice in the country. Now, in the other class a couple of days ago, I spoke about the same issue, how you can ensure equity in an unequal society. And I referred to a very popular image which is often used to depict the need for affirmative action. So I've shared that again over here. You can see how equality differs from equity. Equality could be giving equal treatment to all of them, right? Even if they are unequal. For example, if you look at this image here, right? It's a stadium where a match is taking place. There are 3 spectators standing over here with different heights. So they are clearly unequal. But if you provide equality, if you provide them, let's say, an equal step, the inequality will still persist. The shortest person will still not be able to watch the match. The second individual here will barely be able to catch the proceedings, but the tallest person will clearly enjoy the view. So when you provide equal treatment to unequals, it will only perpetuate the inequality in the society. So if true justice has to be done, social justice has to be done, if equity has to be really provided and social justice has to be protected, then you have to treat unequals as unequals. Unequals have to be treated unequally, meaning the one who is the most disadvantaged should get the maximum support from the state. The one who is already at an advantage should get lesser support, or maybe there may not be any need for support from the state. That is how you ensure equity. That is how you ensure social justice. So this is the key argument placed by Justice Gavai while passing this opinion, where 6 of the judges have agreed that states have a right to subclassify the SCs, the scheduled castes, depending on varying levels of backwardness. Is that clear? So essentially, states can modify the presidential list which is notified under the powers of Article 341. But however, there is a condition. The condition is that there should be a clear rationale behind the subclassification. Any such subclassification should be based on empirical data, which means it creates a renewed push for a caste census, a socio-economic caste census, which has been demanded by the opposition as well. If you look at Rahul Gandhi, he has been demanding a caste census. Even coalition partners in the current government, the JDU, they have demanded a caste census. So similar demands have come from Punjab, Tamil Nadu and other states as well, to ensure that we identify the most backward communities within the SC category. So with this ruling, there will be some real implications. There will be some big implications, because the states which were looking to subclassify the SCs will now go ahead and they will bring out the data that is necessary to establish which are the most backward communities within the SC category. Is that clear? Some of the judges, they even spoke about the need for introducing the concept of creamy layer for SCs and STs. But however, this was not part of the majority ruling. Majority judgment has still not supported introduction of creamy layer within SCs and STs, but some of the judges, they did support introduction of creamy layer concept even for SCs and STs. As of now, it's only applicable to OBCs as per the Indra Savni judgment. In fact, Justice Gawai pointed out that why should the son or daughter of an IAS officer should be given the same benefit as that of the child of, let's say, someone from a rural village area. Right? Clearly, there is a difference in their socio-economic status, in their social standing as well. So those who have already benefited from reservation, they should be excluded by using the concept of creamy layer. That's what Justice Gawai was trying to highlight. But however, this has not been part of the majority judgment, right? But there will be a renewed push for bringing creamy layer into SC/ST category as well once the states take up the subclassification. Now, what will be the direct implication of this? The direct implication is that the states which were very eager to bring in subclassification of SCs like Punjab and Tamil Nadu, they will definitely go ahead and they will bring in the required data to justify their claims. So the Supreme Court has said that there should be quantifiable data, measurable data. Subclassification can't be done just for political reasons, just for pleasing certain communities and for creating vote banks. The majority judgment has argued that just for political expediency, you can't subclassify communities and treat them favorably so that you can win votes. That can't be the reason. In that case, the Supreme Court will exercise its power of judicial review and it can still strike down any such unconstitutional reservation. Is that clear? But if it is based on a logic, a certain rationale, if it is based on empirical data established through a certain census, right? If there is a clear backing for the subclassification within SCs, then that will be allowed and the states can modify the presidential list under Article 341. So that is what we learn from this important development. So please take up a practice question. Unequals have to be treated unequally to bring real equality. Critically examine the statement in the context of recent debate on subclassification of quotas. So for such a question, you can begin your answer by talking about either the inequality in Indian society, for example. You can set the context so that you can justify why affirmative action is necessary, why reservation was conceptualized by our constitution framers. So that can be one approach. Or else you can discuss the difference between equality and equity. Maybe you can even draw that image that I showed you to present the difference between equality and equity and how true social justice can be ensured. So you're trying to set a good context for the given question, and then in the body you can discuss the varying levels of backwardness amongst different communities in India. You can bring in some data as well to back up your argument. You can talk about not just SCs and STs because it's a wide open question. You can bring in the debate surrounding subclassification of OBCs as well. Bring in the concept of creamy layer, the judgment of Indra Savni case, and the recent ruling of the Supreme Court, which has allowed the states to alter Article 341, essentially the presidential list of SCs, which is notified by the president, can be altered by the states. Right? And this is not unconstitutional anymore. It has overruled the E.V. Chinnaya judgment. So present all these arguments explaining why subclassification is necessary, but however, it can't be done just for political reasons. You need to put in that caveat. It can't be just to please a certain community and win votes. It has to be based on a rationale. It has to be based on measurable, quantifiable data. Then finally conclude your answer. Maybe suggest what are the implications, what are the risks that might arise as well, right? You can point out that historically, political parties, both at center and states, they have often misused the policy of reservation. So you can suggest maybe this is where the Supreme Court needs to keep a check on the executive, something like that. So a way forward, a conclusion, right, would complete your answer. Now let's look at the next topic, which is also very important. We have this important article on the front page related to India's complex relations with Sri Lanka. The article refers to another tragic incident in the waters between India and Sri Lanka. A Tamil Nadu fisherman has lost his life after being chased by the Sri Lankan Navy. An entire boat belonging to fishermen from Tamil Nadu has capsized during this chase in the Park Strait Gulf of Mannar region. And one fisherman is missing, 2 are injured, and 1 fisherman has lost his life. So following this incident, India has summoned a top Sri Lankan diplomat stationed in the Sri Lankan High Commission, leading to fresh diplomatic tensions between India and Sri Lanka. So let's quickly understand what is this issue between the two countries, the fishermen issue. As you know, Sri Lanka is our maritime neighbor. We share a very long maritime boundary line. We share our exclusive economic zones. They lie adjacent to each other. And we settled our maritime boundary as well through bilateral agreements which were signed in 1974-76. So back in 1974 and 76, under then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, India finalized the India-Sri Lanka Maritime Boundary Agreement that demarcated the international maritime boundary line. It clearly sets apart India's exclusive economic zone from Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone. This is in line with the international law. It is in line with the UN clause provisions that was brought in later as well. So, as per UN clause and the relevant international legal provisions, whatever resources are found in a country's EEZ belongs to that particular country, be it fisheries, be it hydrocarbon reserves or precious minerals. Whatever economic resources are found, they can be solely exploited by that country to whom the EEZ belongs. So what the resources found in India's EEZ belongs only to India. A foreign country or a foreign company or even foreign nationals, they can't enter our EEZ and exploit our resources. That is blatantly illegal. It is poaching essentially under international law. Similarly, resources found in Sri Lanka's EEZ belongs to Sri Lanka. Indians can't enter Sri Lanka's EEZ and exploit the resources. You can navigate, you can pass through. You'll have a right to innocent passage. You can navigate through these waters. But however, you can't exploit the resources belonging to another country's EEZ. So this is the fundamental international legal principle that exists. Now between India and Sri Lanka, the fishermen issue has always persisted because quite often Indian fishermen cross over the maritime boundary line and they try to fish in Sri Lankan waters. So that is the reason why the Sri Lankan authorities around the Jaffna region, they often chase the Indian fishermen. The Sri Lankan Coast Guard, the Sri Lankan Navy, they maintain a heightened alert across the Jaffna Peninsula and the Park Bay and Gulf of Mannar region, and they frequently look out for Indian fishermen who are trying to cross over the maritime boundary line. Crossing over it in itself is not illegal per se, but fishing in Sri Lankan waters becomes illegal. So Sri Lankan authorities have a right to act against the Indian fishermen. Is that clear? And this has often led to a clash between the two sides. So now it's important to understand why are Indian fishermen crossing over into Sri Lankan waters. What's the reason? See, in Tamil Nadu, exploitative fishing has been practiced from a very long time. Around Rameshwaram and the southeast part of coastal Tamil Nadu, several fishermen, they have been able to afford these trawlers, which are mechanized boats, and they employ a very exploitative method of fishing called bottom trawling. In fact, in several ecologically sensitive places, bottom trawling is actually prohibited. Because bottom trawling drops these mechanized nets to the bottom of the sea floor and it scoops up everything that is available. All organisms found on the sea floor will be scooped up by bottom trawlers. So along with the edible fish, several other marine organisms which are not even consumed get caught, and it brings a very huge catch for the fishermen. So it's very profitable for them. But however, it does not allow enough time for nature to replenish the stock. So it can be very detrimental to the marine ecosystem, and hence bottom trawling is often prohibited or tightly restricted in several fishing grounds around the world. But in the case of India, even though regulations are present, it is often violated. And the Tamil Nadu state government has given a lot of subsidies to fishermen, which allows them to buy mechanized boats and trawling machines. So they have frequently employed bottom trawling as a technique, more or less exhausting the fishing stock. And this pushes the fishermen out of desperation because their livelihood depends on it. So out of desperation, they frequently cross over the waters, they cross over the maritime boundary line, enter Sri Lanka's EEZ, and they blatantly fish in Sri Lankan waters. Now, this is not a new issue. It has persisted from 1980s. But many argue that this was created by India itself. Recently, Prime Minister Modi and even Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar, they blamed Indira Gandhi for these maritime boundary agreements signed in 74 and 76, through which India apparently handed over Kachativu Island, which is present over here. Now let me show you where Kachativu is located. The recent Kachativu controversy during the election season was centered around the same issue. The Kachativu Island that you see over here, very close to the maritime boundary line, historically was seen as part of British India and the kingdoms present in today's Tamil Nadu region. But it has always been a point of dispute between India and Sri Lanka post-independence. So following negotiations between India and Sri Lanka, India agreed to give up its claims over Kachativu. It is true, it is correct that India gave up its claims on Kachativu and handed over Kachativu to Sri Lanka. But it was not a charity or a gift that India gave away. It was not just a short-sighted decision. It was actually a well-thought-out decision by India, because it was essential to maintain good relations, friendly relations with a small neighboring country. When it comes to international relations, the bigger powers are expected to show a bigger heart. And moreover, this was a transactional arrangement. In diplomacy, it's usually transactional. You give something, you get something in return. Principle of reciprocity plays a big role in diplomacy. It's not that India simply gave away Kachativu. In return, we secured access to Wadj Bank that you see over here, which is closer to Kanyakumari. So this was the exchange that we did. Even Sri Lanka had claims over Wadj Bank. But India wanted Wadj Bank for itself, given the precious resources found in this region. So India secured its sovereignty and access over Wadj Bank, in return giving Kachativu to Sri Lanka. But Kachativu is not just economically important for fishermen on both the sides. It has a lot of historical, cultural significance. This small island over here between Jaffna and Rameshwaram, it has been historically used by fishermen from both the sides. Indian fishermen and fishermen from Jaffna. They both use this island to rest, to dry their fishing nets, to dock the boats. Plus there is also a church, the St. Andrew's Church. There is a fest which happens every year, which is very important for the Christian community present on both sides. So historically, Indian fishermen had access to Kachativu. They would use the Kachativu Island, a very small uninhabited island, for resting, drying their nets and docking their boats. But after the maritime boundary line came up and Kachativu was transferred to Sri Lanka, the access for Indian fishermen got restricted. As per the agreement, Sri Lanka was not supposed to restrict the access for Indian fishermen. But given the relations that developed between both the countries during the civil war in Sri Lanka, the rise of Tamil militancy, Sri Lanka started curbing the entry of Indian fishermen, thus preventing them from accessing Kachativu. So since then, the issue started escalating. Because on one hand, Tamil militant groups like LTTE, they were getting cross-border support from Tamil Nadu. Sri Lanka was worried that LTTE militants were fleeing into Tamil Nadu using the same sea route, and they were smuggling in weapons and other illegal substances, including drugs, funds and weapons, which was fueling the militant movement in northern Sri Lanka. So Sri Lankan Navy, Coast Guard, they enhanced their patrolling and they even started targeting the fishermen deliberately sometimes. Because Sri Lanka alleged that India was backing LTTE. Sri Lanka held India responsible for supporting LTTE and training and funding LTTE. So In order to pressurize India, Sri Lanka sometimes would deliberately target the fishermen. Let's say if fishermen from Tamil Nadu got arrested, they would be detained in Sri Lanka for months and years together. And in many instances, Sri Lankan authorities would open fire, even though fishermen weren't posing a threat. And it was a blatant attempt to kill the fishermen or to injure them, so that it would create a huge uproar in Tamil Nadu. Because this issue became very sensitive, highly political in Tamil Nadu. So every death of a Tamil Nadu fisherman or arrest of a Tamil Nadu fisherman, right, would create a political crisis in Tamil Nadu, exerting a lot of pressure on the central government. That would push India to reach out to Sri Lanka in order to secure the safety of Indian fishermen. So that is how Sri Lanka misused the issue as well against India. So this has been a persistent issue. So to resolve this, we had even set up a joint working group on fisheries to clearly demarcate the fishing grounds and to put in place mechanisms to prevent Indian fishermen from crossing over. We did set up a joint working group and it came out with several recommendations. But unfortunately, it has not been well implemented. Today, the Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, the Tamil Nadu Fisheries Department, and all the concerned authorities, they all proactively encourage the Tamil Nadu fishermen to give up bottom trawling, to not cross into Sri Lankan waters, right? But despite all these measures, every now and then, Indian fishermen cross over to the other side. And when Sri Lankan Navy or Coast Guard chase them, it results in such incidents where fishermen get injured or get arrested, or worst case, they get killed as well. Even last year, there were similar incidents where few fishermen were killed. So every time this happens, it leads to a diplomatic issue between India and Sri Lanka. So we are yet to find a permanent solution for this situation. And especially during a coalition era, under the UPA government, for example, the DMK from Tamil Nadu, the DMK which was in power at the state, it was a key coalition partner at the center. It would bring in a lot of pressure on the UPA government to bring that pressure on Sri Lanka as well to secure the release of the Indian fishermen. So Sri Lanka would be unhappy about the pressure from India, and it would move towards China because of this. So this issue is not just about the economics of the region, the well-being of Indian fishermen. It goes beyond that. There are strategic dimensions to the issue as well. So it's very important that we resolve this issue as soon as possible. It has persisted from decades. Today we have very good ties with Sri Lanka because recently we have given almost $4 billion worth assistance to help Sri Lanka overcome the economic crisis. India is deeply invested in Sri Lanka. We have key projects going on in Sri Lanka. We need to leverage that. We need to work with all the sides, with Tamil Nadu as well, with the people of Tamil Nadu, the fishing communities, and ensure that we resolve this crisis. And we shouldn't allow such issues to disrupt the broader strategic relations between two key neighboring countries. So take up this practice question. The fishermen issue has remained a persistent issue in India's ties with Sri Lanka. Discuss. So I'll not give you a model answer for this because it's a very simple topic that I've explained in detail. Now let's see how many of you can write an answer and post the answer in the comment section. Now let's move on. Let's look at another important article on page number 8. This column is related to the topic of money bill. Recently, the Supreme Court has accepted a petition challenging the money bill route, which has often been misused by the central government. It's been alleged that the ruling party at the center, the BJP and the NDA coalition, they have often misused the money bill route to bypass the Rajya Sabha. There have been few laws that have been passed. For example, in the previous term, there were few controversial laws that were brought out by the Modi government, and these bills were labeled as money bills in order to bypass the Rajya Sabha to prevent any further debate or any obstruction in the parliament. And essentially, these legislations were bulldozed through in the parliament without much debate, without much contribution from the opposition. This has led to criticism, allegations that the center is misusing the money bill route. And this could be seen as unconstitutional as well, as it dilutes the role of Rajya Sabha, and more importantly, it hits at the federal structure of the Indian constitution. Because Rajya Sabha essentially represents the states. It's the council of states. So this is where states get some representation at the central legislature, at the parliament, to play a role in lawmaking, to protect the interests of the states. So by bypassing Rajya Sabha, by using the money bill route for even regular bills, It's been alleged that the center is essentially undermining the constitution itself. So a batch of petitions had been filed, and now the Supreme Court has accepted this, and a constitution bench has been set up to examine the possible misuse of the money bill route. That is the context. So let's quickly understand what is a money bill. If you look at Article 110 of the Indian Constitution, it defines what is a money bill. There are 6 specific categories under which a bill can be classified as a money bill. Essentially, a bill which has a significant expenditure from the state's exchequer, right? Or a bill which is related to taxation, a bill related to borrowing by the central government, or custody of the consolidated fund, the contingency fund of India, with regard to expenditure incurred on even the consolidated fund of the public account, right? These 6 specific categories listed under Article 110. Under these specific categories, a bill can be classified as a money bill. Is that clear? Now, when it comes to introducing a money bill in the parliament and passing a money bill in the parliament, there is a very different process, a procedure which has been prescribed in the constitution. Before I discuss that, you should also know that there's something called financial bills, which are a little different from your money bill. Article 117 provides for 2 categories of financial bills. So these financial bills are different from your money bill. Within the Article 170, there are 2 categories. Under category 1, we have these 6 matters mentioned under Article 110, where a bill can be classified as a financial bill. But it won't take the money bill route. Money bill has a very special route which has been given. Category 2 deals with any other expenditure incurred by the government or any other appropriation which is done from the consolidated fund, which falls under second category of financial bill. So financial bills are taken up through the regular route, through the regular parliamentary process, but money bills have a special route where Lok Sabha gets primacy when it comes to passing of a money bill. Is that clear? So let's understand why this has been done, why the constitution provides for primacy to the Lok Sabha. So if you look at examples of money bill, the budget which was recently presented, right? The budget which comprises of a financial statement and the appropriation bill. So both are essentially related to taxation and expenditure from the government. So that clearly qualifies to be labeled as a money bill. Now the question is, who determines whether a bill is a money bill or not? Who will decide whether it's a regular bill where both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha should play a role in its passage, or should it be classified as a money bill? This decision is made by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Speaker of the Lok Sabha has a discretionary power. Is that clear? The Speaker will determine whether the bill introduced with the government is a money bill or not. And government can introduce a money bill only on the recommendation of the President of India. President's prior approval is taken to classify a certain bill as a money bill, and then it's tabled in the parliament, and Speaker will classify this as a money bill. And only Lok Sabha can have a debate and push amendments into a money bill. Only Lok Sabha has the full authority when it comes to passage of a money bill. This does not mean Rajya Sabha doesn't have any role. Rajya Sabha has a role, but it's only a nominal role for the Rajya Sabha. Once Lok Sabha passes the bill with or without amendments, Rajya Sabha gets 2 weeks notice. It has a 2 weeks time period, 14 days essentially, within which Rajya Sabha has to send it back to the Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha can discuss, debate, suggest amendments, but none of it is mandatory. It's not binding on the Lok Sabha to be accepted. Lok Sabha may accept or reject it. And usually Lok Sabha, which will have the majority for the ruling party, the ruling coalition, will often reject the recommendations of the Rajya Sabha. Is that clear? So may or may not be accepted. The amendment suggestions suggested by Rajya Sabha may or may not be accepted by the Lok Sabha. This gives primacy to the Lok Sabha essentially. Rajya Sabha almost has no role. Right? Now this feature was added in the Indian Constitution by our constitution framers for a specific reason. This is actually drawn from the British Constitution, the British Parliament. It's of British origin. See, even the British Parliament is a bicameral legislature. There is a House of Commons where you have the elected MPs, the representatives who are directly elected by the people. Then you have the House of Lords. So respectively, they are the equivalent of our Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So in Britain, in 1911, a constitutional change was introduced where the passage of money bill was curtailed. The powers was curtailed with regard to House of Lords. Only House of Commons was given the right to introduce and amend a money bill, because that will represent the will of the people, right? So in many ways, it ensures that the executive can freely function without being held hostage by the unelected. Because in the House of Lords, the members are not elected by the people. They don't represent the will of the electorate. The House of Commons, which is the popular house, represents the will of the electorate. So to ensure that the will of the people is represented and the government's functioning is not curtailed by the unelected, this provision was added. So we borrowed this from the British Constitution and it was added to the Indian Constitution as well, because Lok Sabha represents the will of our electorate. To ensure that the government can function smoothly without being held hostage by the unelected members in Rajya Sabha, which can cripple government functioning, this provision had been added. So this is a system of checks and balances in our Constitution. Rajya Sabha holds the government accountable. It ensures that the executive is held accountable to the parliament. At the same time, Rajya Sabha's powers have been limited. It has been curtailed in areas like money bill so that the government can function freely without being held hostage by the unelected representatives. But however, the government quite often has misused the route. Not just the Modi government, even previously there have been instances where regular bills also have been labelled as money bills just because they wanted to avoid a debate in Rajya Sabha, just because they wanted to push through the bill immediately and avoid any role for the opposition, prevent the opposition from interfering with this piece of legislation. For example, recently when the Aadhaar bill was brought in, it was classified as a money bill by the speaker, triggering a controversy. Because Aadhaar Act, which was supposed to give legality to Aadhaar, the unique identification system, how can it be a money bill, right? Because money bill clearly is falling under one of the 6 categories. Should be related to taxation or appropriation of funds, or there should be a clear implication on the consolidated fund, public account, or the contingency fund. But the government gave a different interpretation of its own, stating that Aadhaar will incur appropriation from the consolidated fund and justified that it is a money bill. In fact, this was challenged in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court of India, a smaller bench of the Supreme Court, upheld the constitutional validity of Aadhaar Act. It upheld Aadhaar to be constitutional as well. But however, the question whether the bill really qualified to be treated as a money bill, that remained. Then in 2017, during the budget, the Finance Act, which was tabled with the Finance Minister, it was very, very controversial, one of the most controversial finance acts ever. Because through this, the Modi government amended the jurisdiction and the composition of multiple tribunals. Tribunals are quasi-judicial bodies. So, altering the jurisdiction and composition of so many tribunals by using the route of finance bill, which essentially qualifies as a money bill, was a clear intent on the part of the government to avoid any further debate in the Rajya Sabha, to only give a nominal role to the Rajya Sabha, to ensure that Rajya Sabha can't halt the legislation. So this led to a major controversy. Many tribunals saw a significant shift in their composition and their jurisdiction. So a lot of petitions were filed at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, however, upheld the constitutional validity of the Finance Act 2017. But there are questions whether was it correct for the government to treat this as a money bill. Then we also had Finance Act 2019, through which the PMLA was amended, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Through this 2019 amendment to PMLA, a lot of strength was added to the Enforcement Directorate. Additional powers were given to the ED, which today has been criticized by opposition and by the critics. They say that ED has become extremely powerful. It's been misused by the ruling party at the center because of the tremendous powers that the ED has been given through some recent amendments. The definition of proceeds of crime with regard to money laundering was altered. It was amended, and this was done through the Finance Act route. So by using the money bill route, PMLA, which is supposed to be a regular law, was amended by the government. So there has been such controversies in the recent past. There have been repeated incidents, and the court has been looking into these issues repeatedly. Though these acts have been upheld as constitutional eventually, right, the question remains whether it was correct on the part of the government to treat the bill as a money bill And was there an intention to bypass the Rajya Sabha? Was the intention of the centre to avoid any debate and avoid Rajya Sabha playing a role which could possibly obstruct the bill from getting passed? So if that is the intention of the centre, then it will fall under the doctrine of colorable legislation. It's a very important legal maxim. According to doctrine of colorable legislation, if something is prohibited, let's say something, the constitution says that something can't be done. If the government tries to do that through an indirect route, then that law becomes colorable. Anything which has been directly prohibited, if you try to do it indirectly, right, by misusing the existing provisions, then such a law, such a order, such a notification becomes colorable. Understood? Now let's say I urge all the students to not miss any class, right? That is the order which has been directly given to you, that you shouldn't miss any class. Now if you somehow manage to do that indirectly, let's say you still bunk and you still give proxy attendance through your friend, you're indirectly still doing the same. You're bunking the class, but just recording your attendance indirectly. So your act becomes colorable. You're never in the class, essentially. You still did what you wanted and violated the order as well, right? And that becomes colorable action. So any law, any legal attempt by the government, by the legislature, right, which tries to do something the law, the constitution has already directly prohibited through indirect methods, becomes colorable and it can be struck down by the courts. So that is the case that the Supreme Court has now taken up. Now this has very big implications as far as Indian federalism is concerned. As I told you, Rajya Sabha in a bicameral legislature plays a very distinct role when it comes to holding the executive accountable. It can play a very important role in keeping the centre under check, in preventing abuse of the dominant power of the party which has majority seats, right? It gives a voice to the states, because eventually Rajya Sabha is the council of states. It gives representation to the states. So Rajya Sabha MPs, so truly represent the federal structure, and bicameralism helps in promoting federalism in the country. So if the government is adopting the colorable route, using indirect methods to bypass debate in Rajya Sabha, to basically leave out Rajya Sabha from a passage of bills, by disguising regular bills as money bills, right, then that essentially undermines the constitution itself. So that is the question which the Supreme Court will now examine. A larger bench of the Supreme Court has taken up this petition, and the final judgment will have very big implications as far as Indian federalism is concerned. So please pay attention to this topic, track this particular case. We will be covering this as well whenever there are new developments. Now coming to other articles. We have few other articles relevant for prelims and mains. So let's take a quick look. We have this editorial on page number 8 that is related to the Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill 2023. Now this bill has been proposed by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. It is still in the draft stage. It has not been tabled in the parliament as of now. It's in the draft stage. The government is working on this bill, which will essentially bring regulations for broadcasting services in the country. So this proposed legislation will have implications for broadcasting industry and the entertainment industry as well. So generally, whenever a law is proposed by the government, usually there is a lot of consultation that is involved in the pre-legislative process. In a democracy, in a participative democracy, it's very essential to generate different views and opinions from different sections, from different stakeholders, even before a law is drafted. For a well-functioning democracy, it's not just enough to have deliberations in the parliament after a bill is introduced, but even before the bill is considered, even before a draft is prepared, right? The government should engage with all the stakeholders, be it the opposition, the civil society, the media, the private industry, citizens in general. That is why generally the draft bill is made public. The draft bill is placed in the public domain for engaging in such public consultations to get a feedback regarding the provisions, the changes that are necessary. You might have heard that whenever a new bill is proposed by a government, the draft version of the bill is put up on the concerned ministry's website. The ministry will carry out an outreach with all the stakeholders publicly, openly, transparently. It will engage with all the stakeholders to generate their views and opinions so that it can be incorporated into the final bill which will be tabled in the parliament. That is how laws can be ensured to be more inclusive, right? To include the concerns, demands of all the sections of the society. That is what really strengthens participative democracy. But with regard to Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill, there is a concern which has come up. The ministry has released the draft only to a few select entities. Instead of making it publicly available freely and transparently for everyone, the ministry has chosen to use a secret route. It has selected only few broadcasters and few entities and shared the draft bill only with them. It's not freely available, publicly available. The ministry also has used a unique watermark which will help in identifying the leaks. If, let's say, someone were to leak the draft bill to the media, to the public, the ministry can identify which entity or which individual leaked the bill to the public by using the watermark trace which has been added to the draft bill. Now, this is highly questionable. It's a highly questionable practice. It's questionable conduct as part of the government's behavior. Because as part of the pre-consultation stage, before a bill is drafted, it is essential in a democracy to have a public, open, transparent consultation. But by giving the draft bill only to few select entities, the government is leaving out the other stakeholders. Now, this bill which has been proposed will have an impact on content creation. It will affect content creators. It will affect digital influencers. It will affect media outlets, the entertainment industry, broadcasting companies. Now, the government has chosen only few entities and only shared the draft bill with them. Civil society has not even been considered. It has not been shared with the media. It has not been shared with the common public. So regular people can't even access the draft bill, even if you want to look into it. Even small-time content creators, digital influencers, small media entertainment organizations, they can't have access to the bill. Only the select entities, only they have been given the version of the bill to generate a view and a feedback from them. Now, on what ground is the government carrying out this discrimination? Because see, the interest of large broadcasters, large entertainment companies is different from a small individual content creator, right? Let's say you take a small media company or a small company which is in the entertainment broadcasting business, compare that with a giant broadcasting company which almost has a monopoly in the industry. Their interests are completely different. The interest of the weaker party is completely different. So in any new law, it's very important to generate the opinion of all the stakeholders, the big players, the small players, and even those who are not concerned with the field, even civil society, NGOs, media, public, everyone should be able to make a contribution. That is how laws become inclusive. But the government is clearly keeping out certain sections, and that raises concern with regard to the health of Indian democracy. That is the point of the article. The article says that such practices, they have a chilling effect on freedom of speech and expression. When you're talking about broadcasting services, it involves your fundamental right to free speech and expression. For example, if you look at OTT platforms, your streaming services, right? They have already imposed a lot of self-regulations on their content following the IT rules, the controversial IT rules that were notified in 2021. Through the new IT rules of 2021, the government has given itself a role when it comes to regulating OTT platforms. And out of fear of government action and public backlash, the creative producers, directors, and the streaming services themselves, they have curbed their content. They have basically toned down their freedom of expression to please the masses, to please the public opinion. Now this hurts creativity. It will hurt freedom of speech and expression. In a free liberal society, you should be able to say anything you want or depict any content that you want, right? As long as it is not inciting violence, as long as it is not directly harming anyone, right? Every kind of content should be tolerable in a free liberal society. But because of the government action, the stringent rules which have been brought in and the role of the government in regulating the platforms, there is a chilling effect on them. Even though government doesn't directly regulate OTT platforms or there is no ban on any such content, it has a chilling effect, meaning the entities themselves will self-restrict. They will contain their freedom of speech and expression because there is a fear of a government backlash or a public backlash. So similar concerns exist with regard to the new Broadcasting Services Bill. If the views of small content creators and media companies is not taken into account, if the feedback from civil society, media and public is not taken into account, and if such a bill favors only the government or maybe the big broadcasting services, then tomorrow it might have a chilling effect on the small-time players, thus curbing their freedom of speech and expression. The government will become the gatekeeper. Government will decide what is to be broadcasted, what should not be broadcasted, if not directly through the doctrine of chilling effect. Essentially, by using the legal arm of the state and by using the legal provisions of the law, the state can indirectly ensure that the content creators, the media firms themselves restrict their freedom of speech and expression. That essentially becomes a chilling effect, right? So the fear of backlash, the fear of action being taken against them, it will restrict the individual's freedom, right? And that essentially is chilling effect. So that is the concern being expressed by the editorial, which is indeed a genuine concern because the bill has not been thrown open for public consultation. In a democracy, there is nothing called a secret bill. You can't selectively give the draft bill only to few entities and keep others out, right? So this is something which is very concerning, which has happened, and correctly the editorial raises the issue as well. Next, we have another editorial related to genetic engineering. So recently, this is again related to the Supreme Court. A 2-judge bench of the Supreme Court delivered a split verdict on the commercial introduction of GM mustard in India. I'm sure all of you know what are genetically modified organisms, right? Selective modification of the gene structure can bring out desired qualities in the concerned species. It could be a plant or an animal. So you can essentially edit the genetic sequence, add the required DNA sequence and bring out desired qualities. Now this has great application with regard to agriculture because you can develop different crop variants which are resistant to certain pests, which are resistant to pesticides, herbicides, in order to increase their productivity. So this is seen as a panacea for food security problems. The application of GMO is that if you can bring out drought resistant, pest resistant variety of crops and bring out varieties of crops which are essentially resistant to certain pesticides, which means you can freely spray pesticides without harming the plant and thus increase the yield. So this has great potential in agriculture to transform agricultural productivity, right? So it is seen as a panacea for solving the food security problems of the world. But however, genetic engineering is essentially playing God. It's as good as humans playing God. You're playing with nature. You don't know the unintended consequences on the ecology, on the environment. So there are ethical concerns involved as well. So with regard to genetic engineering, there is a whole field of bioethics involved. How correct is it to meddle with the genetic sequence? What will be the long-term health implications? What will be the long-term ecological environmental implications? This has not been well studied, well documented. Even though sufficient studies have been conducted, we don't have any long-term data with regard to the long-term impact of GM modification. So in India, as of now, there is only one GM crop which has been commercially released. Can you tell me which GM crop is it in the comments? There's only one GM crop which has been approved for commercial usage in our country, and it's a non-food crop. When it comes to food crops, there are many contenders. We have brinjal, we have rice, we have corn and soybean, and even GM mustard. Delhi University has developed a variant called DMH11, Dara Mustard Hybrid 11 variant. Now this variant of mustard went through all the trials, because in India we have a very strict trial process which is implemented by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. That is the concerned nodal ministry to regulate the testing and commercial introduction of GM crops in India. because any GM introduction will have a detrimental environmental impact. So under the Environment Ministry, there is an appraisal committee, the GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. The GEAC is the concerned nodal authority to grant approval for trials and eventually order the commercial release of GM crops in India. So recently, the DMH11 variant, which is an indigenously developed variant of GM mustard, it passed all the trials. There are very stringent trials to be conducted as per the GEAC and Environment Ministry guidelines. You need to try out the GM variant in different cropping seasons. India has 2 to 3 primary cropping seasons, and we have multiple agroclimatic zones. So any entity, maybe a research organization or a private company which is trying to introduce a GM variant, they have to approach the Environment Ministry and GEAC and conduct these trials accordingly in different cropping zones, in different cropping seasons and agroclimatic zones. Once the efficacy is tested, once the benefits are established, once the side effects are also established, depending on the data collected, GEAC will decide whether to grant approval or not for its commercial release. So recently, GEAC granted commercial approval for GM mustard, which would have become the first GM food crop to be commercially rolled out in India. But environmental groups have opposed its introduction on ethical grounds and environmental grounds, and also the related health concerns. And as a result, the petition has reached the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has delivered a split verdict. It was a two-judge bench, which included Justice B.V. Nagaratna as well. So one judge has supported the commercial release of GM mustard, the other has disagreed. So now the matter will be referred to a higher bench, and the Supreme Court is yet to pass a final ruling on the commercial rollout of GM food crops in India. So the editorial here points out both the pros and cons of genetic engineering. The editorial does recognize the potential of GM food crops to transform agricultural productivity. That too in countries like India, which is still a primarily agrarian economy, right? GM crops which can withstand certain pests, pesticides, etc., it can really transform agriculture, boost agricultural productivity and secure food security as well. Given that we are facing the adverse impact of global warming, extreme weather events, they pose a direct threat to agricultural productivity in the future, which could threaten our food security. So GM crops might be the way forward in the coming decades. But however, there are downsides, there are risks. For example, forget the ethical concerns for now. At least if you look at the ecological environmental concerns, it's still not clear as to what will be the long-term environmental impact of rolling out GM crops. And the other concern is, what if certain industries establish a monopoly? Because if you roll out such GM variants, farmers will be tied to that company only. They'll have to buy the seeds only from that particular company. Let's say there are certain GM crops which are acceptable only with certain pesticides, certain fertilizers. So you get locked in with that company. The farmers will get locked in. They can't use any other pesticides or fertilizers. They'll have to stick to the pesticide or fertilizer provided by the supplier. So one or maybe few companies can establish a dominant position in the market, leading to monopolies and duopolies, which can exploit the farmers. So there are serious concerns with regard to the impact on agriculture, impact on farmers, impact on the economy. So without addressing these concerns, it is not suitable to roll out GM crops in India. But of course, you need to look at the positive side as well. And that is why the editorial is urging the court and as well as the authorities, the Environment Ministry and the GEAC, to take the right balanced position, to consider all the possibilities, to consult all the stakeholders and take a balanced decision whether to roll out GM food crops in India or not. Because many countries have already rolled out GM food crops. Some of them are reaping benefits in their agriculture sector, but of course the environmental concerns, health concerns are present. So we need to find that middle ground, that balanced approach to strike a balance between both the positives and the negatives. Next, we have another column related to India-UK relations. I'll not spend too much time on this. I just want to present the potential that exists in India-UK relations. The writer here is talking about the great opportunities that lie ahead for India and United Kingdom. See, India-UK, we share a very complex history. Right from our colonial days to post-independence era, India, UK have always had a complicated relationship. Especially post-independence, the UK has often favored Pakistan when it comes to strategic issues like Kashmir. India has often felt a bias, a certain degree of mistreatment from UK historically. But despite all those problems in the past, today there are so many common areas for India, UK to work together. There are common interests that are driving this relationship. See, United Kingdom is one of the key markets for Indian exports. In the last few decades, apart from Europe, the UK has emerged as a critical market, and now that UK has quit EU after Brexit, we have to give special attention to the UK market. We can't club it with the larger European market. When generally we say the larger European market, it refers to the EU market, right, which operates under the European Union, which has its own set of monetary policies, fiscal policies, and customs and market laws. So UK, which has quit the EU following Brexit, deserves special attention from India as it is a key market for Indian exports. Plus, UK can bring in investments into India. There are many top UK companies, investors who have invested in India. Plus, there are Indian companies as well which have invested in the UK. So it works both ways. So India also has major investments in UK. Many Indian companies have big investments in the United Kingdom. And more importantly, we have a lot of people that connect India and UK. A very large Indian diaspora is present in the United Kingdom. They form the living bridge. They form the cultural connect. We have students, professional workers, migrants, and several families who have settled for generations in the UK that form this close cultural bond and economic bond between India and UK. So there are plenty of opportunities that exist, not just in the economic domain, but also in the defense and strategic domain. See, in the economic domain, we are negotiating a free trade agreement. There is a proposed FTA being negotiated between the two sides. And most likely, we are going to finalize the FTA this year. Both sides were waiting for the elections to be over in their respective countries. So in both countries, we have new governments. The Labour Party has come to power in the UK, and we have an NDA coalition government in India. So now both governments have a clear mandate. So they are out of the electoral phase. Now they can focus on business. So it is widely expected that India and UK are going to sign the free trade agreement very soon, which will benefit investments, exports, job creation, and even the flow of people. India's main concern is about the strict visa immigration policy of UK, which is affecting our students and workers. UK's main concern is about large-scale illegal migration from India. From India, there's large-scale illegal migration happening to several Western countries. So UK is worried about that. So both India and UK have signed a mobility partnership and migration agreement that allows India better access, easier visa immigration policies that will benefit genuine visa seekers like students and professional workers. But it will help UK at the same time to curb illegal migrants and deport them back to India. So this deal has set the stage for a full-fledged FTA, which will benefit our investors, our exporters. And UK can also capitalize on the Indian market, which is a massive market for the United Kingdom. And in the defense and strategic domain, we have common interests. Geopolitically, we are aligned together. We have common concerns about China and its rise and aggression. We have common concerns about terrorism, especially state-sponsored terrorism that emanates from Pakistan-Afghanistan belt. So we already have very close counter-terrorism relations. Our intelligence agencies work together, both RAW and IB. They have very close working relationship with MI5 and MI6. Then even NIA works closely with Scotland Yard in counter-terror cases. Even our armed forces, they work very closely with each other. We have joint exercises. All the three armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, they have their own bilateral exercise with the UK. From Konkan to Ajaya Warrior, right? We have such dedicated exercises between the Indian and British armed forces. And also don't forget, UK is a major player in the Indian Ocean region. Even today, UK has few overseas territories, British Indian overseas territories. It has a formidable navy which can be deployed across Indian Ocean from Hormuz Strait to Malacca Strait. So there are a lot of common factors that keep us together. UK is a supplier of military hardware to India. right? India has procured weapon platforms from UK in the past, and today UK is interested in collaborating with India in research and development, focus on innovation. It is willing to transfer military technology to India, right? And even in the civilian domain, from space to artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, there are plenty of areas where India, UK can work together. So that is the picture that the writer is painting here. He's essentially talking about the potential that exists and how the relationship can be propelled by the FTA which has been proposed. So he's actively pushing for the FTA to be finalized and signed so that this relationship can be taken to the next level. So next, let's look at this article on page 12. It's another important article. As I told you, we have a lot of articles today. This is related to the Disaster Management Amendment Bill that has been pushed by the government into the parliament. In the ongoing session in the Lok Sabha, the Disaster Management Amendment Bill has been introduced. As you all know, the Disaster Management Act was a paradigm shift in our approach towards disaster management. We brought out the DM Act in the year 2005, following 3 back-to-back mega disasters. In 1999, we witnessed the super cyclone in Odisha, where thousands of people were killed. Then in 2001, we suffered from the Bhuj earthquake in Gujarat, where again thousands of people were killed, entire Bhuj was flattened, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Then we had the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. So India was barely prepared for any of these disasters. We never had a proactive approach towards disaster management prior to 2005. Around the same time, there was a global awakening. In the 90s and early 2000s, the UN was leading few initiatives, and it had brought out the Yokohama strategy and the Hyogo framework. So this had established a more proactive response, a more holistic, comprehensive response to disaster management. So Yokohama strategy of 1994 and Hyogo framework of 2005, it set the global framework, and India, which had been severely affected by these back-to-back disasters, was finally inspired to bring in a law that will mainstream disaster management governance in India. So from a reactive approach, we became more proactive, and we adopted the disaster management cycle, which today has placed India in a much better position when it comes to dealing with disasters. Because we are not just focused on during disaster phase response and relief, we are focusing on pre-disaster management, focusing on planning, preparedness, how we can prevent a disaster, how we can mitigate the impact of a disaster. And after disaster, we don't forget the affected area and the victims. There is long-term focus in post-disaster management to reconstruct, rehabilitate, and recover the region to normalcy. So this critical law is now being amended by the government. There is a proposal, and the amendment bill has been tabled. So let's quickly see what are the key provisions that are being proposed by the government. One, the government is proposing a database, a national and state level database on disasters that will consist of all the vital information for disaster management, from risk assessment to vulnerability profile for various disasters and regions, including the disaster management plans. Everything will be documented in a single master database that is proposed to be set up at the national and state level. Next, since our cities have become more vulnerable, our heavily populated capital cities and other major cities have become heavily populated, they are at greater risk of suffering from the impact of disasters. Because higher population density increases your exposure. When a disaster does occur, right, eventual impact will be much higher if it happens in a densely populated area. So to protect our cities, to make them more disaster resilient, the government is proposing the establishment of Urban Disaster Management Authority in all the state capitals to exclusively focus on disaster management in that particular city, and in other cities which have municipal corporations. Essentially, cities with a larger population, they are the focus. We already have National Disaster Management Authority at the national level, State Level Disaster Management Authority at the state level, and District Level Disaster Management Authority at the district level. Apart from that, the center is proposing a new institution, Urban Disaster Management Authority, at the level of every state capital and major cities which have a municipal corporation. Then finally, the government is also proposing the NDMA and SDMA to be given powers to draft their own national plan and state plan. See, under the previous version of the law, the National Disaster Management Plan and State Level Disaster Management Plan, they were prepared by the National Executive Committee and State Executive Committee respectively. These executive committees are official bodies. It comprises of all top officials. National Executive Committee, for example, at the central level, it's headed by the Union Home Secretary and includes all the top secretaries of key ministries and departments. Similarly, the State Executive Committee at the state level is headed by the Chief Secretary of the state, with all the top officials at the state level from various departments and other organizations. So, under the DM Act, previous version of the DM Act, the NDMA and SDMA, which are the nodal decision-making bodies, they came out with the broad policy. NDMA came out with the National Disaster Management Policy in 2009. Similarly, SDMAs came out with their own disaster management policies. Based on this policy, plans were prepared by the executive committees. National Executive Committee prepared the National Disaster Management Plan in 2016, which was approved by NDMA. And based on the national and state level policies and plans, the State Executive Committee prepared individual plan for respective states, which were approved by the SDMA. But now, the government is proposing new plans to be created by NDMA, SDMA themselves. Previously, NDMA, SDMA were simply approving the plan, which was prepared by the executive committees. So this arrangement is proposed to be changed. But however, it has already led to a controversy because the government is simply creating more institutions, more complications in disaster management. By establishing a UDMA, a new database, and by giving NDMA, SDMA the powers to make new plans, it will only lead to more overlap, more confusion, and it could lead to a certain impact on disaster management in India. That's a concern expressed by opposition parties with regard to the new proposed bill. So let's see what route it will take in the parliament, and once it gets passed in the parliament, we can have another discussion on this key topic. Now coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look. On page 10, the European Commission and the election of its president was in the news. The European Commission is a very important body. It's one of the primary organs of European Union, right? It's one of the key primary organs of the EU. The European Commission is like the executive. It's the executive organ. It implements the decisions of the European Council, the policies of European Council, and the European Parliament, which is the lawmaking body, along with the Council of Europe. European Parliament, Council of Europe have the lawmaking powers. They act as the legislative bodies of the EU. European Council is the highest decision-making body. It consists of the 27 leaders of EU countries. The presidents and prime ministers of the 27 EU members, they are part of European Council. So European Council is the highest decision-making body, coming out with the broad policy and goals. The laws and regulations and guidelines are made by the Parliament, where direct elections are held, and by the Council of Europe, which acts as a bicameral legislature essentially. Then you have a European Commission, which is the executive arm of the EU, which implements all the laws and policies and decisions. So European Commission is headed by a president, which is a very pivotal role. It's the president of the European Commission who interacts with global leaders, who plays a key role in negotiating agreements with other countries. For example, we are also negotiating a FTA with EU, and the negotiations happen between the Ministry of External Affairs and European Commission, because that is the executive arm of the EU. So the president has been recently elected. The incumbent has been re-elected actually. Ursula von der Leyen. She has been re-elected as the president of the European Commission. So you should understand the process of election for prelims. The structure of EU, the functions of these organs, and the election of the president of European Commission can be important. There is a two-step process in electing the president of the European Commission. One, the European Council, which is the highest decision-making body consisting of the 27 leaders, they propose the name of one or maybe few candidates, and they elect the most popular candidate. All right. Now, this elected nominee is referred to the European Parliament for a secret ballot voting which takes place in the EU Parliament. Is that clear? The initial names are proposed by the European Council, the 27 leaders. There is a round of voting which takes place within the European Council, and those shortlisted, they are pushed for another round of voting through a secret ballot within the European Parliament. And finally, the President of European Commission is chosen. That is the complex process involved, so you should know which organs of EU are involved in electing the President of European Commission. Next, on page 12, we have this article referring to another tragedy, this time in Himachal Pradesh. Devastating cloudbursts have hit Himachal Pradesh. This has triggered massive flash floods. Number of people have lost their lives, and basically we are witnessing simultaneous disasters. The deadly landslide in Kerala, floods in northeast India, and cloudbursts and flash floods in Himachal Pradesh. So let's quickly understand what exactly is a cloudburst. Cloudburst is a type of extreme weather event. Is that clear? It's an incident where there is a sudden burst of rainfall, very intense rainfall, which usually occurs in mountainous regions, hilly areas. Cloudburst is a feature, it's a phenomena, meteorological phenomena, seen only in hilly mountainous regions. So when there is sudden intense rainfall in a short area, in a very small given area in a short span of time, such an event is called a cloudburst. There is extreme, intense precipitation that happens. An extreme amount of rainfall is received in a very small area, right? In a very small area of a small geographical size, and that too within a very short span of time. So such a meteorological event is called a cloudburst. There is a specific criteria to identify this. According to IMD, the nodal agency for forecasting rainfall, if a rainfall of excess of 10 centimeters per hour is received in a small geographical area of 20 to 30 square kilometers within a short span of time, then this event is declared as a cloudburst. These incidents, they occur frequently in the Himalayas, particularly in the northwest Himalayas, from Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh to Uttarakhand, in the Western Ghats as well, from Maharashtra to Karnataka to Kerala, and also in the northeast of India, towards the northeastern hills. These are the vulnerable regions in India. So there will be a sudden dump of water in mountainous slopey areas where the water gushes down with very high surface runoff. This can trigger flash floods in the downstream. It can lead to secondary disasters like landslides, and that is what results in large-scale loss of life, destruction of property and infrastructure, roads, railway lines, power cables, even dams, hydroelectric dams can be destroyed. It leaves behind a trail of environmental destruction as well. So this phenomena occurs when the warm, moist air coming from the sea and the plains, if it encounters a hilly mountainous region. The warm, moist air, which is of a lower density, it starts climbing up, it starts rising up the windward side of the mountain. And as it reaches the top, it will encounter the cold air mass present at the top, resulting in a sudden violent interaction, causing a sudden precipitation of the cloud, the rain-bearing clouds, leading to heavy intense rainfall on the windward side, which can trigger floods on both the sides, even the leeward side. So this phenomena is called a cloudburst event. Now coming to the next article, states can buy directly from the Food Corporation of India. The center has informed the states when it comes to lifting food grains from the Food Corporation of India, the states can do it themselves. Is that clear? So this is a very important observation and a change introduced by the Ministry of Food and Consumer Affairs. The FCI maintains a buffer stock of essential food grains to ensure food security and to manage food prices to contain inflation levels. So states now can lift the essential food grains directly through open market sale, which is conducted by the FCI to dump the excess buffer stock. This will help in clearing the excess buffer stock, prevent food wastage as well. It will help the states to deliver food security at subsidized cost. Got it? So parallelly, the center is implementing its own food security schemes, like the public distribution system. Then you have the National Food Security Act, which guarantees right to food. So almost 81 crore beneficiaries are benefiting from the food security schemes. We have the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which is being implemented as part of the PDS and the National Food Security Act. So this is really reaching out to almost 81 crore beneficiaries. The center is playing a direct role in lifting FCI grains and distributing them. The states can also lift the food grains directly through open market sales. FCI will call for these open market sales. Instead of using the auction route, states can directly purchase it from the open market through FCI godowns and release it for public distribution. So this will further help in improving food security in the country. And also, the Minister for Food and Consumer Affairs has pointed out the importance of the price monitoring system app, which has been launched by the ministry. The 4th edition of the app has been released. On this app, all the stakeholders can monitor the prices of essential food items, from food grains to pulses, even vegetables and other essential food items. Their prices can be tracked on a real-time basis by using the price monitoring system app developed by the Ministry of Food and Consumer Affairs. So the article mentions this, so please make a note. There were 22 commodities which were listed on the app. You could track the prices of 22 commodities. Now, this is being increased to 38 commodities. So 38 commodities, you can track those prices in real time, which will benefit the farmers, the middlemen involved in the back end of logistics in the agriculture and food processing industries. Clear? So coming to the last article, we have an update from the Paris Olympics. India has secured its 3rd bronze medal. After Manu Bakar secured the first bronze in the 10-meter air pistol event, India got the 2nd bronze medal in a mixed team event under the 10-meter air pistol category, where Manu Bakar again registered a 2nd medal, a historic 2nd bronze, along with her team partner Sarabjit Singh. So yesterday we have secured the 3rd bronze medal. Swapnil Kusale from Maharashtra has secured the bronze medal again in shooting. So shooting has often been a boon, a blessing for India. This is where India has won a lot of medals, right? Across categories within shooting, India has secured a lot of medals. So Swapnil Kusale has secured a bronze in 50-meter shooting event, making it the 3rd medal for India in the current ongoing Paris Olympics. On this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. I know it has been a slightly longer session, but as I said, there are 11 to 12 articles. So by attending this session, I promise that you can cover all these topics comprehensively without having to go back and read the newspaper. It's not just the time you save on newspaper reading, you will save the time in collecting the background information, the analysis. So in just one session of 1 hour 30 minutes, I think we have comprehensively covered everything. And if you liked it, if you learned something from this, do let me know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.